Hello, welcome back to Stable Discussion. Today we're going to be talking about search and effectively how we think about finding things on the internet. I'm in Dia right now. This has become kind of my default web browser. The other day I was playing World of Warcraft. Eventually my inventory is getting full of random stuff. You collect items, all the items do different things. They're used for crafting, all sorts of different things. I ended up with some tangy clam meat and I was like, okay, I don't know what this is for. What do I even use this for? And so I had this question, right? So I went to my favorite browser, Google, and I asked, what do I do with tangy clam meat? When you do a Google search, now you're getting this AI thing at the top, but you plug this in and try and figure out, okay, what do I do with this? You'll go into your search engine. Your search engine is running all, the search engine optimization gives you a list of sites, right? So you've got a list of interesting sites and you get some link metadata, right? Details about like what's on these sites. This entices you to click on one of these links. So you go to a website and for instance, if you go to Wowhead, you get barraged with a suite of ads popping up. And in the middle, you've got the content that you care about. The thing I specifically cared about was, is this used in a recipe? You have to know that if you're cooking, it's called a reagent. And you have to click on the thing and then you go in here. And at that point, you rely on the UX of the website, right? It needs to present to you the information based on your query. You're hoping that this website's UX best serves you up information related to the query that you have. So you want to be able to answer that question very quickly. But depending on which site you go to, you'll have a different experience. On this one, you have to go down the page, you have to find the thing and click on it. On Wowpedia, there's fewer ads, that's nice, but then you have to scan the whole page and find the thing on the page, right? So this was kind of that first experience that you have here. You got the clam meat in the middle here. You have to know to click on reagent down here. And then you've got Wowpedia. And you go onto this page and you're like, oh, okay, God, get out of the advertising. You're like, oh, am I going to read all this? This is a lot to read. Control F, clam, meat. Oh, there's a bunch of different types. Tangy, I got it. That's used in this thing. Okay, cool. I see. So you have to kind of like scan or kind of find the thing on the page. That's one option. Now, what if I go down the other path? So if I put this in, I give it details about WoW Classic is what I'm playing, then it's going to do some lookup and try and tell you, oh, it's actually a cooking ingredient for this thing. It's for these cooking skills. Got it. So you can look for this thing. If I click on that, it'll say, what are those? It'll open up a new search for me and says, cool, here's a skill requirement. Here's some details. This other experience is really interesting. If I use this AI search engine, I still have the same query as before, which is, hey, I've got this sort of tangy clam meat thing. I want to try and figure out where do I use it. I go to my browser, I use this AI search feature, and get an answer based on a series of web search results. It goes to these pages for me, figures out what I need, and gives me the details. I can just read. The information is presented to me in a way that makes sense for the task I'm trying to accomplish. If we go to this conversation, I ask this question, I get details on where I got these results, and then I get the details here, right? And it tells me exactly what I was looking for. These two experiences are pretty distinctly different. And I think it's pretty obvious which one feels better. Now, things get even more interesting when you ask another question. Say I had another question, I get to the end of this, I've found this tangy clam meat that I care about, but I have another thing I want to look for. I basically have two options. I can either try and find it on the page that I'm already on, right? If I'm on this tangy page, and I wanted to find something else, right? Same game, I want to find something else. Now I'm searching, where the heck do I search? Okay, got it. Let's do tender crockless meat. Okay, got it. So I have to type in the thing, it can kind of find it, and now we're good. Same with the other site. I guess I could find it on the page. It looks like it's used in two different recipes. Also something I might not know otherwise. So that's kind of tricky to figure out. The other option is you just start a whole new search, which is probably the more likely option. I don't think it's very common nowadays that you would try to find it on the same page just because it's so overwhelming to navigate a lot of pages. You just came for one answer. You don't know the layout of the page. So you might just start a new search in any case. Now, it's a very different experience when you're doing AI search. I have this query, I've asked it a question, it's giving me the answer. And now when I have a follow-up question, I have a wildly new experience that didn't exist before. And this is the custom search experience. I can just type tender crocolisk meat, I don't have to say what game, what I'm looking for. I didn't even have to say anything about the type of thing I'm looking up, right? I just say, what about it, right? Because I already said before, classic WoW recipe. I even spelled recipe wrong, you can see. But, and I spelled crocolisk wrong too. Fantastic. But it still knew what I was talking about, right? And so now it gave me that recipe that we were looking for. So this is like a new thing, right? This is a new experience. These AI searches are now able to give you data in a much more consumable way that's more convenient for you, right? You're in control of the search experience to a much more significant extent than you used to be. You don't get the challenge of having to deal with the UX of a lot of different web pages. Everything's very consistent and it's a more consistent experience. You do have to learn a little bit about how to prompt, how to give it enough context to give you the right information, but it's a much more consistent experience than the one above. And so you can see, here's the conversation that I had. I was going through my inventory. I have all these questions, right? So first I'm asking about the tangy clam meat. Then I'm asking about tender crocolisk meat, raptor egg, spider ichor. At some point I just start saying words because I just kind of want to know the details of them. And it's giving me details on whether or not these are used in recipes. And if they're not used in a recipe, it'll tell me where they're used, what they're used for. Some of these things weren't used for recipes, but they were used for alchemy. I have a friend that does alchemy, so I gave them to him. This is really interesting. Your search has now become a custom search interface where I can just type in words and it'll give me very clear instructions. And this is not overwhelming and it's very easy to use. Now, even amazing searches like Perplexity, when I type in something like this, and then I follow up with, what about tender crocolisk meat? It's going to give me a very complete, full answer here. What I've found is eventually sometimes Perplexity doesn't quite remember the previous question. Some of the context starts to get lost because it's thinking you're doing a search every time you give it something new. Dia, on the other hand, seems to keep this going as a flow of conversation. It's not a series of searches, it's a conversation. And I find that much more compelling and much easier for creating this type of experience. And I think I find this much more compelling as an experience for searching. You can really see there's a huge shift that has happened here from needing to use your query, go through a search engine, read a bunch of links, go to a web page, figure out where things are, search the page, figure out your information, long thing, versus ask a question, get an answer, and read it. It's a very different experience. Now, this isn't the first major change to how we get information, right? And I think it's good to go back and kind of think about how the internet got to be the way it is today. So if we go back and we look at how web directories used to exist. You used to have these web pages that had huge archives of links, right? A directory of links that gave you categories broken down into subcategories to categorize things you might look up online. And so you'd be able to access a bunch of different web pages, but you'd have to go through this directory to find them. Similar to the phone book or the index of a book, has a similar kind of vibe to that, right? And Google, even though they were building this amazing search engine, they still had a directory structure that existed. They had their Google Web Directory. I find this compelling because even though they knew what the future looked like, they still needed to build an interface that existing users already understood. That's still what's kind of happening with Dia, right? When I ask it a new question, what is something? I have two options, right? We're not getting rid of Google search, but if you don't want to, you can do the new thing, right? There's this interesting pattern that starts to emerge where the new stuff is always built alongside the old. When we start thinking about these web directories, they're human curated, right? The provider was basically profiting largely from ads and from placement. If you paid more, you get a better position. The ability for you to put your website up on any one of these sites is just basically contacting the person who runs the site. You'd be able to submit your site. You can even see a link there to submitting a site. The idea that somebody clicks through to a site is actually pretty high. The work that you did to find the site entices you to complete the work. Click through, find what the information is. You already did all the work to find it, so why don't you look? When search engines came along, you had this ability to now put in a search and you would get back a series of different results, and you didn't have to do the work to hunt through to figure out where things were. You didn't have to search through the entire directory. This was a huge benefit. And now, as a search provider, Google could profit from ads. It could put ads on these pages. It could also profit from the data of what people are searching for. The data you got was much better because you got direct questions that you were answering. And the click-through likelihood was still pretty high. You're probably not going to get the full answer just from the metadata. You can kind of see, I made this search and Goblin Devil Clams is there, but I'd probably still click through just to see what I'm doing. So that was the era of search engines. And now that we're in this AI search era, things have changed. The provider is largely profiting from data at this point. We'll see if they find a way to do advertising in the future, but at this point, it's largely just profiting off of the data of like what people are searching for, how they're finding answers, what answers they're finding, that sort of thing. But the cost to become visible, you used to be able to submit your site to a search engine and have it posted there. But now the cost of visible is that you basically need to show up in the underlying search engine, and your site needs to be very relevant to the questions that people are asking. There's less visibility into the questions people are asking. And so that's brought through this very difficult challenge of becoming a source on these different sites. And not only that, but the click-through likelihood has really dropped. When we kind of look at what the provider can provide, when you look at like a directory or search engine or an AI search, the values that they provide are kind of different and they've changed over time. You know, before like these directories, they would give you a link, they'd give you a category, something you could find, and you would be presented with that, and that would be the value. The value is giving you the link. As we got into search engines, you were still getting provided a link, you were getting some metadata additionally, but one thing that moved over was images. You can do searches for images and find images through programmatic search. You no longer needed to find a site that offers images and then find the images through that. You could just get it through the search engine. Now, there's better search results in some places as well, but I think for most people, when they're looking for an image, they can largely rely on a search engine to give them that image. Additionally, users have to click through for information for text, the content, for videos, for apps. Those are still things that they have to click through. What this AI curation has done is it's shifted text and content over to being something that the provider can fully show. Now you don't need to click through to get the content. And that's a huge shift. But it is still true that there's a lot of forms of information that do still require a click through and are still interesting to click through to see. And I think that's still going to remain true for quite a while. As I was thinking through how searches have really changed, how we've gone through from this complex process of finding information we care about to a very simplified process where AI helps us find information, I'm now thinking about, okay, well, how do these sites survive, right? There are these wiki sites that exist that the way they make money is off of advertising. So advertising is, of course, key. Affiliate links, also a great way of making money. You know, they can advertise something and get commission if they sell. Donations, merch, and there's grants available for building things like this. Additionally, there's sponsorships for running these wikis. There might be events or conferences associated with them or collaborations with other content creators. There's potentials for partnerships. There's data licensing opportunities, and then there's paid API access. These are the general like revenue sources I can think of related to a wiki. And so what I've done is I took all of those and I kind of broke them down into this matrix here. We've looked at SEO and traffic. Assume that the search engines are going to go away or that this traffic is going to be a lot less reliable because of AI search. What's going to happen, right? And in an AI era, how much value can you offer through your site? And how much can you profit from this work? Is this still a profitable business? The most vulnerable area for most websites is getting these advertisements. The benefit of those advertisements on your site is directly proportional to how much traffic you get. The affiliate links that you have on your site, you have to be able to click through the site, see the link. The AI isn't going to persist those affiliate links through. So those links are also tied to this. Not only that, but then you've got these basic sponsorships, sponsorship deals associated with the traffic on your site. It's a lot harder to convince sponsors to invest in your site when you've got declining traffic. And there's a lot of traditional grants you may have relied on. There's some kind of like plays over here that are less requiring a huge traffic demand, like getting grants or doing collaborations. But as the world's changing, people are less invested in this model in general, so you're less likely to get good collaborations. And you're also less likely to get grants because there might be more interesting grants associated with an AI era movement. So we need to start looking elsewhere. These are areas that generally now need to be avoided because of this change. What do you really have? We have our existing community. We have the existing people visiting the site. What we can do is still rely on community donations. That's still a great way to engage with the community and give back and have a roadmap that the community can contribute to build new features or build new things or offer different things to community members based on their donations, similar to Patreon or those sorts of things. This is a really interesting path. Additionally, there's events and conferences. You're taking that existing customer base and bringing them together into community events and activities. That creates high value. You aren't relying on SEO traffic, you're relying on your existing audience. You can have sponsors interested in that event or those conferences. Additionally, you can build newsletters. There's a lot of money going into newsletters now. Newsletters are a place where you have a captured audience that you can advertise to, independent of your SEO traffic. You need that traffic to build the initial audience, but once you have an audience built, that newsletter can maintain a more steady pace of profitability. Merchandising, of course, still ways to capture audience. And then there's some AI ad intelligence. If you have behavioral data about how your site works already, you can potentially build that into an analytics product that you can sell to advertisers to place ads on your site based on behavioral data that you already have. Those are some interesting opportunities and pivots, but really where the world's going is places like data licensing. If you have well-structured data, that can be a huge benefit because a lot of the internet isn't very structured. A lot of data in general isn't very structured. So if you're able to take the site that you have, structure the data well, that's a asset that people are willing to pay for. Additionally, if there's a community or an entity that you represent, you might be able to get subsidies from that entity. Riot Games funds the League of Legends Wiki, for example. And so you may be able to have access to direct support for the thing that you represent. These companies also know that audience capture is really important now. So that becomes a partnership opportunity in a way. You can help curate that audience, and they can benefit from that audience whenever they make new games, products, or have sales. Additionally, there's enterprise features, being able to build in AI features around specific tiers for pricing. That can work once you have the data set up. Additionally, building an API around your data. If you've got really interesting data, especially with WoW, you might have interesting like player data and historical data about even some of the stats in the game and how those have changed over time to become more balanced and better in the audience and what the sentiment around some of those changes has been. That's some interesting data that could be packaged up and sold. So that's a data licensing option. The API access option is more about potentially using that data to give insights into how changes might be seen in the future. You could be building an API around sentiment around a potential change. Not only this, but there's strategic partnerships. Reddit has a huge deal with Google around their data. They're a very successful forum that a lot of AI models use. And then, of course, there's grants that are now focused on human curation and verification of value. So there's some interesting opportunities there as well. The space has really changed quite dramatically. The traditional ways that a lot of people thought about making money online, which is largely this kind of bottom quadrant here, that no longer exists in the way it used to. We don't have these same opportunities available to us as much as SEO traffic changes really dramatically. This is a huge shift. It's going to impact everyone. As we've been evaluating what the future holds for a lot of different companies in our work, we've been thinking a lot about this, and I just wanted to share some of the insights that we've had about this. I think that AI search is definitely here to stay. It offers a very unique opportunity for customers. That doesn't mean that businesses are going to completely go away. They have a lot of other potential revenue sources, and I think you just need to be especially more creative about how you think about the future of those revenue sources. It's going to be a very different landscape going forward. The internet's changing, and we're changing with it. If this was an interesting watch for you and you're excited to find out more about us, you can find us at stablediscussion.com. We've got a lot of different ways to engage with our content. We've got our YouTube channel that you're watching, but we also have our Substack where you can read more about what we think about AI and the work that we've been doing there. Additionally, we've got our own chat. You can feel free to chat with us here, ask any questions you have about Stable Discussion or about what we talked about today. This video is going to be available in there, so you can just chat with me and find out what I think about these different ideas. It's a virtual me. But we'd love it if you subscribe. Every subscription that you make to our channel helps us deliver more interesting value to you. So thanks so much. The world's changing. Let's change with it.